Assume every future meeting you attend, Toastmasters or not, is going to be hybrid, online plus on-site. Work, school, church, Toastmasters, that's how the world is evolving. Part of the good news is we can use our Toastmaster clubs to learn the skills to be effective and polite. Today's talk is going to move you toward that goal. I have 3 questions. The first one, when you have less experience with an activity, do you need more practice and time for preparing the task, or do you need less? When more things can go wrong in an activity, do you need more care and time for the task or less? And when your speech or actions are going to be recorded or might be recorded, do you make more or less effort? I suspect there's a lot of yeses to these 3 questions, and therefore put more care, more commitment to a pure online or a hybrid meeting than you would an in-person on-site meeting, Toastmasters or not, because you're going to have less experience. The people who are running the meeting other than you will have less experience. More things can go wrong, and there's a good chance it's being recorded, whether you realize it or not. The title of the talk says better practices, not best, because all this is still evolving. We are still exploring what can be done in what circumstances. And many of the suggestions I've got tonight are aimed at preventing problems or touchy calls etiquette-wise, such as who and when do you interrupt to tell them their sound is off or their video's off. See, techno gremlins are looking. You have to be prepared and have backup plans. But as we get better with hybrid meetings, there's a lot of benefits. We can give a talk to any audience, anywhere around the world. If you record speaker view with screen share, then you can share your story, your message out time and space. Real time, evaluators can see the faces of some of the audience. And a recording that captures both the speaker and the audience can help you assess afterwards what worked. Preparation. The early and prepared speaker gets the worm, has more impact. We need to realize in planning our meetings that there are 6 roles that are particularly important, not 4. The presiding officer, Toastmaster, general evaluator, topics master, as in a standard old-fashioned Toastmaster meeting, but now both the Zoom master, the person who's running the equipment in a hybrid room, and the Zoom host. And with other software, there's analogous things, analogous positions. You need to know these different roles. And a suggestion I have for all Toastmasters in every club is to get practice in being Zoom master and in being Zoom host. Related but different. A couple of horror stories, if you will. Sandy in her introduction mentioned that there was one talk where I walked in and I knew I was in trouble. The host told me, "Did we remember to tell you that you're going to also be broadcast as a webinar?" Well, anytime they ask or start off by saying, did we remember to tell you? You know the answer is no. So I had to, on the fly, deal with the fact that my technical talk had lots of technical diagrams, and yet I couldn't point, I couldn't use a pointer, and they would not even see me, the people who were off-site, webinar. So I had to throw in words to guide the audience to where to look on some of my complicated diagrams. I couldn't change them, there wasn't time. Went to Rocketdyne in northern Utah once, again, a hybrid meeting, and found out that I had a rectangle roughly 2 foot by 3 foot that I had to stand in. Off in one direction was the camera for the remote sites, and the physical audience was 90 degrees perpendicular to looking at the camera. So I had to do this all the time, all the way through the talk, looking either at the camera or the physical audience. I couldn't do both. We are still learning how to deal with electronic props. And if you're going to use one, slides, opening and using PowerPoint or Excel or anything else, you've got to work with the people organizing the meeting ahead of time. There's no fixed way to do it. You may have to run the computer or have hand signals to guide people through what you want them to do so that you don't have to basically interrupt yourself. If you're the Zoom master, you have to get there early. A couple of weeks ago at Jack C. High, I got there 5 minutes after I should have. I set up late, which meant I set up wrong. And all through the meeting, I was scrambling to get back into the right frame of mind with things set up the right way, and I never quite made it. Those 5 minutes made a lot of difference. If you're the general evaluator of a Toastmaster meeting, ask your speakers, do they want an on-site evaluator or a remote evaluator? Depending on their learning objective, they might want one or the other, or they may not care. During a meeting, vigilance. If you're the audience member at any given point in the talk, your visage or visage is particularly important. Show your reactions with your face, your hands, thumbs up, big smiles. Actually exaggerate more than you might do in person. You're probably going to be muted, and so your way of encouraging and giving feedback to the speaker is here and your hands. No speaker wants to talk to a blank wall. And also don't interrupt. I've seen an increase in interruptions in Toastmaster meetings in the Zoom era, and we shouldn't be doing that. And one more method of interrupting is chatting during a talk. That's the same thing as whispering to a neighbor on site. Now do chat after a talk. Give your little love notes and compliments to the speaker, great, but do it after a talk just like you would in an in-person meeting. Chatting between speeches, not during speeches. Now, if you're the presiding officer, the Toastmaster, the general evaluator, the topics master, and you're introducing speakers and evaluators, notice if they're unmuted or have their video off. And if so, clue them in. And if there's any chance that they have things set a bit wrong, ask them, can you hear me? Can I hear you? Before you launch into your standard introduction, get any of those glitches out of the way before you take off, set the stage, and the speaker is then running with you. If you can't hear at some point, cup your ear. Another thing you have to do if you are presiding officer, Toastmaster, general evaluator, topics master, is watch the people further down the agenda and see if they go offline. And if so, you're going to have to scramble, sooner the better, to deal with them. And a good example happened in one of my clubs recently was a person was giving an icebreaker. Their assigned evaluator had a techno gremlin strike, dropped offline. The general evaluator didn't realize it. Fortunately, there was an experienced Toastmaster who could step in with no warning and give the icebreaker's evaluation. Without that, then the club would have looked a bit really poor, that here the person gets all geared up for an icebreaker, no evaluation. So if you're running part of the meeting, look to make sure the relevant people are online and not having trouble. If you're a Zoom host, one thing you might do is spotlight speakers so that the audience can see them before they start speaking. In an in-person meeting, we know that as you're walking up to the stage, you should stand, let everything settle down, and then launch. Well, in a video person or video hybrid meeting, the equivalent of that is to be able to get all settled, get geared up, and then start speaking. If you depend on speaker view, then while you're silent and gathering your thoughts and getting ready to launch, Zoom isn't focused on you. The fix to that is for the Zoom host to spotlight the prepared speaker so that they can launch. And also, if there's some distracting noise someplace, Zoom isn't going to go bouncing around. Spotlight overrides them. After the meeting, probably the most important thing to do is, if you are a speech evaluator, get that evaluation to the speaker. I confess, sometimes I have been quite tardy on that myself, but people have noticed a decrease in getting evaluations back to speakers. In conclusion, there's a lot of potential in what's happening here. We're still exploring, we're still learning. You've got to put the care into making the hybrid meeting better. Think about etiquette. Record your observations, record your experiences, share them. I invite comments on the handout that will be posted with this talk. And I think it's an exciting time, it's a challenging time, and let's go do it.
Opening up for questions for Steve.
Steve,
Sandra.
do you? Oh, sorry.
Steve, I like the idea of spotlighting the speaker before they start so they can get situated. But if I'm the Toastmaster, what am I going to do to spotlight that speaker other than talk, give the introduction and, the title?
One thing that we are still learning is that you have, if you're using Zoom software, in addition to being Toastmaster, there is Zoom host and Zoom master. Now, when we're all online, as we are tonight, no one's Zoom master because we're all using our own equipment. The person, I believe, the only person who can spotlight a speaker is whoever is the Zoom host. I can't do it tonight. You can't do it tonight. Scott can do it, or anyone that Scott designates as a co-host. Or co-host you can designate ahead of time, or an alternative host you have to do at the beginning of the meeting. So one of the things I'm doing with Rise and Shine and Jack C. High is I am starting to designate co-hosts so that there are multiple people during the meeting that have the magic power of spotlighting and unspotlighting as well as other magic powers. So tonight you
But
cannot do that.
But spotlighting means what? Putting them up on the screen in a bigger spot, or what does that mean?
It overrides speaker view. If I'm Zoom host and I know you're going to speak, then I think it's right click, depends on whether you're in the Mac or what. You go up and you spotlight, which forces everybody to see an enlarged vision of you. Scott.
Steve, I'm thinking a demonstration. Sandra, right now, do you have us in speaker view or gallery view?
I have you in I have speaker view right now. Well, I have gallery. Everybody's up on the screen.
Everybody's on the screen, so you're in gallery. So everybody that's in gallery, or if you're not in gallery, switch to gallery. And now what I'll do is I will spotlight. Now this is different than pinning. Everybody can pin someone, but I will spotlight Steve. And what will happen, so you can see it before it happens, is it will be like you got switched to speaker view. And you can actually, after I do that, you can override it and switch back to gallery if you choose, but he will remain spotlighted until I unspotlight him. It also gives me a warning it didn't used to give me. Wow.
Yes, now what I see is the host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
Right. So now we should have Steve in speaker view, and that's spotlighting. Now, when I started talking, did everyone notice that it still stayed on Steve?
Yeah.
That's what spotlight video does. Pin does the same thing, but you choose to do it or not. What I'm curious to find out, and I'll watch this recording, is if spotlight overrides the recording and leaves you spotlighted as well. That would be really cool if it does,
Right.
because that's one of the things I noticed. Now, if you are going to have a host spotlight, you have to warn people. Otherwise, especially if they're the less technical, they're going to go, what just happened? And even after I unspotlight Steve, which I'll cancel the spotlight now, I believe now as I start talking, it just switched to me. Okay. But everybody's still in speaker view. It didn't switch you back to your gallery view if you were in gallery view. If you want to go back to gallery view, you have to manually do that yourself.
Thank you.
These little polishing things in a purely in-person meeting, there's all kinds of little polishing things. You're always, you wait up front for somebody to come in and shake hands, and then you depart, preferably without walking in front of the person who's now got the speaking area. So these little polishing things, the Toastmasters has built up over decades. For some of these little protocol or etiquette things, we are just now really getting into in Zoom or Teams or whatever your software is. And because of the complexity, some things the Toastmaster can do, something the Zoom master can do, and something the Zoom host can do. And that comes back to preparation and discussion ahead of time.
And the co-host can do almost the same thing a host can do, but not everything. I'm not sure whether spotlighting a video is a co-host can do that or not. I would have to experiment.
Assign someone to be the co-host and let's find out.
That's what I was just doing. Since you're more familiar with Zoom, I'm going to go ahead and let you, Dave.
All right. Okay, I'm a co-host now. Let's see if I can spotlight Steve. Bob, spotlight for everyone.
There you go.
There it goes.
It
Yes,
worked.
we can.
So that is good information. So the host, the person who owns the Zoom account that you're running, can either assign someone else to be the host and give up their hosting for that particular meeting, or they can assign a co-host that can also do some of these things. So if for instance, if I was the Toastmaster and I have plenty on my plate, I don't want to keep track of spotlighting the video and stuff like that. I want somebody else to be that person. Before the meeting starts, I would assign a co-host, make sure they know what they're doing, and have them handle the background stuff while I run the meeting as the Toastmaster.
One of the things that spotlighting can do, and it is more work, it's another example of complexity, is if someone's not muted, clapping, whatever, then if I'm the speaker and I'm spotlighting, then a distraction, a barking dog or whatever, any place else doesn't cause Zoom to go jump off to somebody else. It stays focused on the speaker. You're overriding speaker view. And as we get into 20, 30, 50 people in a meeting, you're going to want that.
Now, there's another interesting thing I just learned. Even though I am the host, I do not have the authority, because Dave spotlighted you. I can't unspotlight you. Dave has to.
Interesting.
But you're in gallery view now.
Yeah,
I was able to put you back into
Oh
gallery.
yeah,
as
Yeah.
soon
an
as you
individual can
started
go
speaking.
override and go into gallery view, but that didn't cancel the spotlight.
Okay, I just spotlighted him again because I canceled it just a minute after. Now try
I
to,
see. That's why. Okay, now he's in spotlight. Yes, I can.
can you remove it?
Yes, I
Yep.
can. Okay.
Okay.
No, Steve is still spotlighted.
No, he's not. He's just, you're still in speaker view, and that's what I said.
Oh,
Once it
ah.
switches to speaker view, forces you into speaker view, you are in speaker view until you change. And the other thing to keep in mind is you can change even if he's still spotlighted. You can switch it back to gallery view yourself.
I think this is something Zoom is probably going to look into and may change, so that it will remember if you're in gallery view when the spotlight is installed, and when it's turned off, it will revert to gallery view for those who were in gallery view before.
That would be nice for less technically inclined, but
Yeah.
they haven't
Fewer
done it yet.
surprises.
There was one thing about that when we did the conference, I had Steve Gale as my person, and his Wi-Fi wasn't very reliable. And so we worked out our plan. We practiced 40 hours easily, the two of us. And we worked it out so that we would spotlight my computer. I could share my screen if needed, and I had his whole computer layout, and then he would just have to speak, and so that we would be able to use a phone as backup if we had to. And so and when you're doing something, I don't know where he lives, I know it's towards Boise, but not every place has really good Wi-Fi, and so it makes it problematic unless you plan those ahead. We had redundant plans in place between Dave and I and Dan and everyone while we were doing the conference as well.
And that was a comment I was going to make. Steve brought up the fact that you might have a critical role go offline, and we have to make an adjustment. That critical role could even be the Toastmaster.
Yep.
And so it's probably good, at least in the critical roles, once we get doing this more and more, have a backup. Have those redundant plans in place. Have someone who can take over the Toastmaster, or backup, have a backup evaluator, things like that.
I guess that's one way. When we meet for Smile, which is a hybrid meeting, Teresa always sets up both her phone and the computer in the location so that if one goes, she has the other. So that's the alternative, is that we have lots of different ways of connecting now.
I think the Toastmaster protocol, by the way, is the general evaluator is always a backup for an evaluator. In fact, I was the general evaluator at one meeting, and I neglected to assign evaluators for all the speakers. When I realized that and the time came to call on the evaluator for the speaker that I'd forgotten about, it was my job to perform the evaluation to make up for my lapse. We also had a protocol during the contest, several contest rounds. Before the speaker was actually formally introduced, the Zoom master or the Zoom host would ask the speaker to check the sound and make sure that he had pinned the timer. It might be also an appropriate time for that person to ask the Zoom master or the Zoom host, whatever is appropriate, to take that time to spotlight the speaker before the speaker is given the formal introduction, name, title, name. And might take a moment before doing that to explain to the entire audience what is going to happen as a result, so that we're all comfortable. It should become a part of the Toastmasters protocol in the same way that waiting up there for the speaker to come up to the lectern is. And if you're a speaker at a contest, making sure that you, for example, find some way of informing the timer that your speech is finished. Either say, Mr. Contest Master, or extend your hand in the direction of the contest master.
Can I make a comment on that? For the area and division and district conference or contest that we had, we did try to do spotlighting the speaker, but we can't pin the timer at the same time. I don't know if that's still true, but I believe it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's different. The timer, you want the speaker to pin, but the rest of the audience you want them to be able to be directed to the speaker via spotlight. It should be possible to combine the two.
It is not.
The speaker
at the time you couldn't
be spotlighted.
I don't know if it is, if Zoom has changed that, but once a speaker is spotlighted, you cannot pin any other screen. Even the speaker who's spotlighted can't do that.
It's obviously a difficulty because the speaker is not like an audience member for whom the spotlight is important. For the speaker, being able to pin some other communicator who is linked in is more important than the spotlight.
Agreed.
You are correct. However, Zoom doesn't see it that way.
Then we're going to have to tell them that they have to get with the program.
Now the sequence of events though might fix this. If let's say I'm speaking, Dave is the Zoom host, Dave spotlights me.
All right.
Okay. Then can I find, in this case,
You can now switch back to gallery.
or let's see, I can't.
You
What I'm
know
trying
that
to do
Scott
is
the timer. Can you pin Scott?
Yeah, and the answer is I have to go to gallery view or probably speaker view first. And I cannot pin Scott. I can go to gallery view, but I can't pin you.
That's something Zoom has to be informed about. And they have to understand why we want to do it that way.
However, if you go to gallery view, the timer will show up in the gallery somewhere, so that's still possible.
Right. And,
yeah, but when there's 50 people in the gallery, that makes it tough.
well, but there'd be multiple pages. You find the right page. When I'm speaker, I don't need to see me spotlighted. In fact, I don't want to see that. I want to see gallery view to see as many members of the audience as possible. So that I'll make some changes to the handout.
Yeah.
And what Carrie put into the chat a minute ago about another way of being rude is to fiddle around with your background as somebody else is speaking. That good, yes, that gets in there.
Switch backgrounds between speakers if you're gonna switch.
True.
The other thing, and probably not real workplaces would ever have this happen, but we are doing court proceedings on Zoom, and our prosecutor, unless you've turned it off, he will sneak into participants and change your names just to be annoying because he's a lawyer. So there will always be a young man somewhere in the mix who's going to want to screw with it. So I can see why Zoom is trying to protect some of it. When everybody's named the same name, it makes it a little hard.
Yeah, I'm not sure everybody can change somebody else's name. I think only a host can do that. Although I could be wrong.
The prosecutor could be the host, I'm not sure.
Mr.
I would think it
Speaker.
would be the judge who would be the host. To keep the attorneys from both sides from playing these tricks.
This is true.
Steve, I have a question for you as the speaker.
Sure.
You have mentioned Zoom Master. What are the Zoom Master's functions in your meetings?
Generally, what's happened in the clubs I'm in is that the Zoom master and the Zoom host ends up being the same person. That's more accident than anything else. The Zoom master in Rise and Shine or Jackson High gets there early, sets up the equipment, says a few cuss words if necessary to make sure everything's working. Tries to deal with any last minute changes, and then depending on which set of equipment is being set up, have to change camera either by software or turn the camera, change microphones, whatever, depending on whether it's a local speaker or a remote speaker, and then put it all away. And we have found as we're starting, it's a challenge, but we are starting to put Zoom Master on the monthly schedule for this new month. That's the way it is. So we're going to have some new Zoom Masters who are new to doing it. And that's going to require a couple of us who have more experience playing mentor, playing coach, I guess, to help them through it. And
I understand. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It sounds like Zoom Master is another role invented for Toastmasters purposes, while Zoom Host is a Zoom function.
With the proviso that you need to understand it, and it depends on what what's going to happen during a meeting. Is someone going to be doing electronic mumbo jumbo or not? I happen to be the Toastmaster this Friday. This is the draft agenda. Note that I have the presiding officer is DJ, the Zoom master, and I've defined what it is, runs the equipment at the restaurant, DJ. Because this is using my account, I won't be logged in. So what I've discovered is that whoever, because of how I've set it, whoever logs into the meeting first is the host. Now, if I succeed in getting some co-hosts set up ahead of time, then they will. And so I have started to expand here what the Zoom master can do, what the Zoom host can do. And so that's defined here, and then there's the Toastmaster, so forth and so on. So these are meeting functions.
And in my mind, the Zoom master, the Zoom host is whoever owns the Zoom account or whoever signs in first. So somebody signed in before I did for this meeting. They were the host from that point on. I don't know who that was until I joined. And as soon as I
Yes.
joined, I took over the host automatically without me even having to do anything.
And I think, Scott, but so whoever logs in first is the host until either the host or a pre-designated co-host signs in.
Yeah, and I haven't ever played with that, so I don't know how that works. I would have to play with that. Quick time check. There might be more questions, but quick time check. We're at 8:25, and I believe we had one more speaker.
Yes,
we-
we have
and we
one more
have-
speaker. So I was going to say the same thing. We have evaluation, and we have another speaker. So we can go ahead with the evals and then take a break, or what do you want to do here, folks?
I think,
What do you want to do as a GE?
I think we should move on to the evaluations, but I want to give Steve the opportunity to, for the recording's sake, close the Q&A. So go ahead, Steve.
In conclusion, this is an exciting time. We have a lot of potential in hybrid meetings, but we have to learn new skills, learn new etiquette, share our experiences, help people who are coming along the learning curve. And when we do that, we're going to really see quality and some really interesting talks and sessions in the coming weeks, months, and years.